All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cassandra Lunch number 23. Sorry, 31. I'm looking at the wrong deck here. We have been doing this now for more than 6 months. We started this as an initiative in the pandemic, but we're going to continue doing this even as things open up and as the vaccine gets developed, because it's just nice to be able to chat about Cassandra on a weekly basis. Today we have Arpan Patel talking about business intelligence with Cassandra. I think he's going to talk about some open source tools and then different ways to do business intelligence with Cassandra, where you have to add a few tools in like Presto. I want to thank Gakwi for helping produce this event and making sure that we get the content recorded and the blog posts published so that folks can find it on YouTube and on the interwebs after we're done. Thanks, Gakwi. Always looking for help in growing this group. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an organizer. If you want to speak about a subject, please put your email address in the chat and what topic you'd like to speak about, and we'll schedule you for the upcoming weeks. We're part of a much bigger community of data practitioners called Data Community DC. We're open and diverse and always looking to get folks from underrepresented communities to speak about technology and data. We are one of many different groups in this community. Feel free to check out the datacommunitydc.org website. In this group, we cover all things related to Cassandra, which means open source Cassandra, data stacks. We'll probably talk a little bit about Cosmos DB, CQL, Amazon managed key spaces, DataStax Astra, Yugabyte, ScalaDB. These are all Cassandra compliant data stores, and anything that works with Cassandra. So for example, today we're going to talk about BI tools. Arpan's going to talk about BI tools. Normally at this time, we ask people to just introduce themselves if they haven't been to this meetup before. Dipan, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and just mention how you use Cassandra, or what you'd like to learn, or what you can potentially teach the group here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rahul. So I just got to know about this community today. So I went through a recording from last week where you spoke about the containerization stuff and Cassandra and all that stuff. So I have been working on Cassandra for more than 3 years now. Started off with a very basic implementation on my own, then joined an organization where they were setting this up for the first time. So got to learn a lot over there. Currently working for another organization and where they are using Cassandra much heavily. But then luckily have got to learn a lot, grow a lot. The only thing now is that I do work on the regular stuff a lot. I'm saying a lot. Okay, so I do work on the regular stuff, but then have not worked on what I would consider that, okay, these are some things that can actually help me scale my knowledge to the next level. So backups, repairs, we write scripts here and there, do all that stuff, but then can't automate the whole process, have not explored containers. So just trying to build my knowledge up to the next level. I also work closely with all the other teams that I have in my organization, where I would help them with the data models, also when the BI teams are trying to see how they can pull their data here and there, working on some data capture kind of stuff and all that thing. So that's all for me. That is what I have been doing till now for the past 3-4 years, trying to get into containers and learning how to automate all of this on my own now.
Sure, absolutely. I actually don't know why we haven't covered other than containers and Kubernetes, why we have not covered like its deployment. We can talk about. We actually have some content for this already. We can cover that in a future session. Is there anything that you uniquely think that you can talk about in your experience? That would be. We have a bunch of topics, as you can see, we've recorded.
Sure, I can take a look at them. I'm not too confident about talking about it yet. So I do like share my knowledge a lot with the internal teams that we have, right? But then those are the people who would have just started on Cassandra and all that kind of. So I work as the principal engineer in my organization, right? So I can help a lot of people, but then I'm not really sure about the kind of crowd we have over here. But then what I can do is I have many different people, so our DevOps guys and all, who would so whom I work with very closely to set our Ansible scripts or create this Terraform plans and all. So I rope them in, and maybe we can do that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're an open community with lots of different folks with different backgrounds in terms of experience. So as I mentioned, the group we just talked about all things Cassandra, and we tend to have a backlog of topics, and we go through one by one. And if there's somebody who can speak about it, we kind of bother them until they're ready to produce a PowerPoint or Google presentation. But it could be as simple as data modeling, or it could be as advanced as DevOps, or getting data in and out. Your perspective is as good as any. So welcome to the community, and if you can leave your email address in the chat, Akwi can reach out to you, and we can continue the conversation there.
Sure. I'll try to do my best here.
Great, thanks, Dipan. Nice to meet you. It looks like those are the new. That's it for a new face. So welcome again. Group rules. If you have a question, just ask it in the chat. In fact, if you are polite, which we hope you are, you can just have a conversation with the speaker. And that doesn't necessarily mean to ask a question. If you wanted to just add on to the conversation and say, hey, this is something that I've seen in my experience, you can go ahead and politely interrupt and add. It's a conversation. We are one of the sponsors, Anant. We specialize on Cassandra, Kafka, and Spark. DataStax is a partner and a sponsor of this group. So is George Washington University, around the corner from our DC office, who have given us, I don't know, for many, many years, venues to have this meeting in person, but we have recently been, all remote. We have a couple of local sponsors in Chicago and in DC. This technically is no longer a Cassandra DC or a Cassandra Chicago meetup. It's anywhere. So, right now sponsorship just means sending speakers and maybe helping broadcast the events on social media, because all of our costs are basically zero. We have a paid Zoom account, and we use YouTube to publish stuff. So we also have organizational sponsors that sponsor the Data Community DC nonprofit foundation, which is a nice way to market whatever organization you work for, as well as get a tax write-off. These organizations, especially Capital One, leverages our Data Community DC to hire new people all the time, because they're out in the community all the time. We have a few announcements of upcoming events, but anyone have any announcements for anybody hiring, anybody looking for work, any new meetups, hackathons, conferences? Okay. Let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to reorganize this like this. Akwi, you want to just give a quick preview of what's coming up on some of the events?
Sure. So we have the weekly Cassandra lunches like we normally do. We had a DataStax workshop yesterday. If you didn't get a chance to attend, please go check that out. But also upcoming this month, we have a few webinars coming up. They're all listed there. If you want to keep in touch with the meetups and webinars we have coming up, please visit anant.us/events, and hopefully we catch you on one of those moving forward.
Thanks, Kui. And yep, all of our lunch videos are online, as are some of the past webinars and seminars. And we also produce Cassandra.Link, which is the world's best Apache Cassandra knowledge base outside of DataStax. And if you would like to get updates, we're still kind of formulating what the newsletter strategy is, but put your email list and email in the newsletter list, and we'll be sending weekly or bi-weekly updates. We curate content on a weekly basis. So at the very least on Fridays, there's a new edition, but every now and then during the week, as we add new content, there's a fresh edition every morning if there's new content. So check it out. All right, and with that, I will hand it to Arpan. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Arpan, here we go.
Okay, let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see the workflow?
Yep.
Great. All right, so like Rahul mentioned, today we're going to cover business intelligence with Cassandra. This was actually part of my doing SQL and reporting on Apache Cassandra with open source tools. So we also covered tools like Presto, which we'll be using today in the demo portion, Spark, open source notebooks like Jupyter, Quix by Wix, and Polynote, and then today, which would be the business intelligence tools. The ones that we covered today, there are some more, but I guess the most prolific ones, and then Superset's a relatively newer one, which I thought was pretty cool. So I thought I'd like to introduce it. So we'll be covering Metabase, Redash, and Superset. And then we'll also have a demo where we spin up Metabase and show you how easy it is just to get started and how to connect it with Cassandra. So Metabase, if you're not familiar with it.
Can you do me a favor? Can you zoom in just a little bit?
Yeah.
You can maybe even collapse the left. There we go. You can see it. Yeah.
Is that good?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So Metabase, it's a simple and fast open source BI tool for BI and analytics. It does have paid hosting, but it has a community open source version. And with that open source version, you can quickly get set up using Docker or their jar. Within Metabase itself, it has SQL mode. So you don't have to be necessarily a technology savvy to use it. You just need to have a little concept of SQL, but a lot of it, which we'll show you in the demo, Metabase actually pre-handles data for you and does create charts and databases based on the data you've inputted, which is pretty cool. So you don't necessarily have to be super tech savvy to use something like Metabase and Cassandra. And then you can do other things like create canonical segments and metrics for your team to use. Pretty cool thing is you can send data via Slack. So a lot of tech teams use Slack for internal business use, or you can also send emails on schedule with pulses. And you can also use Slack's Metabot, or the Metabase's Metabot in Slack, to view your data in Slack at any time. And then you can also see changes in your data with alerts, which is really cool. So say if you're using this for BI and you notice that there's, like, say in a real world example, when COVID struck and everything started shutting down, you started seeing businesses have impacts, and you're seeing, if you have certain goals or trend lines set and you're seeing numbers drop beneath that, you need to be alerted when something is going wrong. And so you can use tools like Redash, Metabase, Superset to set that up. And then with Metabase, you can have rich, beautiful dashboards with auto refresh and full screen. And a lot of this stuff can be collaborative, and they have notebook editors. So you can do visual joins and multiple aggregations and filtering steps. So will allow you to dig deeper into your data. And then also you can humanize your data by renaming, annotating, and hiding fields. So again, like you don't have to be super tech savvy. So something has a bunch of underscores and a column name, you can rename it to something much simpler to use. And then the big thing for connecting Metabase with Cassandra, Metabase does not natively support Apache Cassandra, but we can use tools like Presto, which is a distributed SQL query engine for big data, and also Spark, which Spark can do anything on the face of the earth. But you could use Spark and the Spark SQL part of that to connect to Metabase. We'll be using Presto just to, since I already have it locally and I can get it started really fast. And we'll show you how easy it is to quickly set up Metabase and show you how fast you can get started. So if that's a hump for you where it's like, oh, I don't want to set everything up, it can get complex. No, it's very simple. We'll show you how to do it. And then also, if you want to check out companies that use Metabase, use cases, get a little insight from other people, you can check out the link, and this will be in the blog post that goes up in accompaniment with the video on YouTube. So you can check out that link there. So then we'll also move on to Redash. Redash is also an open source BI tool that helps anyone of any technical level harness the power of data, big or small. Like Metabase, it does have paid hosting, but there is the open source self-hosted version. They recently did join Databricks, so that's pretty cool. So if you want to, Databricks, if you don't know what it is, it's, I believe it's the people who made Spark, but then they started their own company. And then Databricks is essentially a hosted version of Spark. And like Metabase, it's a fast version of getting started. You can use AWS and use their EC2 AMI images. You can get started on a droplet on DigitalOcean. You can use GCE images, and then you can also use Docker. But there is a little, or there are some prerequisites for getting started with Redash on Docker, but we'll talk about that at the end of this. Like Metabase, it's also browser-based. The ease of use, you can become immediately productive with your data without needing to master complex software, because a lot of it can be done for you, or it's not that complex. In sharing, like Metabase, it can be collaborative, and you can share your visualizations, your queries, and then you can do peer reviews and reports and work together to get your analysis done. And you can schedule refreshes. Like Metabase, you can get automatically updates, and then you can set intervals to where if you want an interval every day or hour, you can set it as needed. And then again, big thing with BI tools, and especially open source, visualization and dashboards. You want to be able to see these trends in your data to make data-driven decisions. That's the whole reason for using BI tools, is that you can use your data, your big data, small data, doesn't matter, as long as you can take that data, visualize it, analyze it, and then you can make decisions based on that to further improve your business. And then Metabase, and I didn't mention it earlier, but Metabase also does have a REST API, but Redash's REST API, you can do what they want or do what you're doing in the UI through the REST API. And then like Metabase, like Superset, there's a broad support for data sources, but the advantage of Redash is that Redash does natively support Cassandra, so you don't have to use a tool like Presto or Spark. But like I mentioned, if you're trying to do this on Docker, you will need Postgres, Redis, Python, and Node in order to get started. So that is that little turn back. So when I was thinking about demoing, I was like, one of the factors in which I considered Metabase, Redash, or Superset was which one would be the easiest for everyone to get started with. And because you would need these dependencies like Postgres, Redis, that maybe not everyone has. So mostly like Postgres, if you're not familiar with it, it's a SQL database. So if you're primarily using NoSQL like Mongo, Couch, Cassandra, and you're not really familiar, well, most people are familiar with SQL databases, but you don't have Postgres necessarily installed on your machine. It's something, just one more thing to install just to get Redash up on Docker. But so that's where Metabase comes in. Metabase, you just run your Docker command and you can go ahead and get started. and then we'll move on to Superset. So
To,
I
to,
believe,
to be fair, Arpin, there are Docker composes that will bring up all this stuff for you as well.
okay, maybe I may have been confused when I was doing some research.
Yeah.
Okay. So Superset, it's under the Apache umbrella. I think it's still currently in the incubation phase, but it's an open source tool for data visualization and data exploration. Like Metabase and Redash, it's easy, code-free user drill downs. You can slice your data, make dashboards, and you can use them for deep analysis. And then again, like SQL and Redash and Metabase, they have SQL editors, so you can use, you can make SQL queries and then create charts from that and do whatever else you need to do that with their editors and IDEs. And then they also have an extensible high granularity security module. So you can have security. So say you want to limit your collaboration. So if you have steps and who can see what, you can utilize authentication. And then they also, in also their dashboards and visualizations, they actually have pretty cool set of 3D visualizations that I didn't necessarily see in Metabase. I'm not sure about Redash, but they had a pretty cool library of 3D images you could do, and you can check that out on their GitHub. And then like Redash and Metabase, they have out of the box support for most SQL speaking databases. But like Metabase, they don't have native support for Cassandra, but we can use Presto and Spark SQL. But unlike the other two, there is no paid service or hosting method for Apache Superset, but it can be set up on Docker. But there is one limitation depending on what OS you're using. So Windows, Superset's not officially supported on Windows, but they recommend in their instructions for installing, you can use Ubuntu desktop VM via VirtualBox, and you can then use Docker's Linux instructions to get started. And then you can see who uses Superset at that link. But again, or I guess we can just open it up while we're here. So a lot of big companies, Airbnb, Lyft, American Express, some gaming, which is pretty cool. You can see what gaming is doing with BI. Rakuten Viki. Yeah, and so you can see what companies people are, or what areas of business people are in and what they're using. So if you want to take that step and getting take your first step into BI analysis and big data and making data-driven decisions using your Cassandra data, these three tools are a great way to get started easily and pretty simple in terms of your whole team being able to use it. All right. And then we will go ahead and get started with the demo. So I'll be using just local DSC, Metabase through Docker, and then local Presto. So can everyone see my terminal? Okay, so I'm just going to make sure my DSC is running. All right, so DSC is running, and then I'm going to start my Presto server. So I'm going to, so if you see here, there's the Presto asterisk and then Presto server. So we'll need to start the Presto server, and then the Presto with the asterisk is a kmod executable to start the command line. We won't need that, but that's something you can set up and you can follow along. So if you check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/AnantCorp, and you find the Presto and Cassandra webinar, you can watch that more in depth of how to get started with Presto and Cassandra themselves. But we're just going to be bypassing the steps of setting up the catalog. It's very simple, but you can go back and watch that. So in the Presto server, we are going to bin launcher, and then there's two methods to run Presto. You can run it with logs and without logs. With logs is run, and without logs is start. I'm just going to run it with start, and there is going to be an error when I hit this, and that's maybe because of my Mac. So I'm running on Mac OS. So You may not run into this if you're using Windows, so I just have to do this with sudo. And now my Presto server is started. So if I want to run my Presto CLI and just confirm that we can see our Presto data, I'm just going to open a new tab. I'm going to, okay, my Presto server is going to be localhost 8080, catalog will be Cassandra, schema will be demo, and schema is just my key space. And then I'm just going to do a show tables. So we have data that we've already set into the table that we're just going to use quickly. It's by no means big data. It's just something that we can show you how you can use Metabase. And the data model is a little wonky, but it's just for educational purposes. So yeah, so I'm just going to close the CLI. And we'll go ahead and get started with Metabase. So if you go to Metabase and their start instructions, all you need to do is copy this Docker run command. So I'm going to paste this into my terminal. And then I'm going to bring up my Docker dashboard and just confirm that Metabase is running. Great. And then Metabase is hosted at localhost 3000. Just give it a second. There we go. That's how easy it was just to get Metabase up. One line of Docker and you go to your localhost 3000. But now we'll show you how to set up connecting Presto, which is connected to our Cassandra. All right, so let's go ahead and get started.
I do want to add one thing. I think you're installing Metabase with like the embedded H2 SQL, the Java in-memory database, I believe. Or does it install? Because I know Metabase also has a dependency on a database, but you don't have to use Postgres. Like Redash, you have to use Postgres.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. I tried looking at the image for Metabase, and I don't think I saw any, because I specifically looked that up recently. I was like, because Redash had dependencies that you needed, I was like, okay, what about Metabase? I know that with the jar you would need Java, but
yeah,
I didn't find anything specific with this specific Docker image we're using.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good one to get started, like if you're doing it locally. But I remember that when we had to install it for a client that was using it seriously, like we had to create another like Amazon RDS Postgres instance.
Oh, okay, yeah, to persist your data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's true. Yes. If you're using this in the cloud, obviously this is just for a single use, so I didn't have to set anything up like that. But yeah, correct. I did read that. So if you want to persist your data and use your Metabase long term, you will need to set up a separate database for that. But yeah, so let's take a look back at the Metabase UI, and we're just going to select our language. And just do a quick setup. And so here, where we're adding our data, you can set it up later. They do provide you a sample database. So if you don't want to connect Cassandra or any other database you're using right away, you can do it at a later time and play with the sample data they already give you. But we're just going to go ahead and add in our Presto. So we are going to select Presto. Name is going to be demo, which is our key space. Localhost is going to be, so this is also another thing depending on your OS you're using. If you're using, for this specific local Docker, if you're using local Presto, it would be host Docker internal, and for Mac. But Windows, I believe it would be localhost, but I haven't had a chance to try it. But if you're using Mac and your connection host is not working, you can try host Docker internal. So our database name is Cassandra, username. And then there's some other options you can do here. We're just gonna ignore them for now. We're just gonna hit next, and our data was there. It's synced correctly. So we'll check it in a second, but we'll just go ahead and hit next, and we'll get started on the UI. All right, there we go. So this is what your generic UI upon startup. Like I mentioned, they have the sample data set here that you can use if you don't want to input your own data. But again, we inserted our key space demo, which had those two tables, spacecraft journey catalog and spacecraft speed over time. So we can click on these and just view them in table mode. But then we can also make visualizations on them directly within that table view. Same thing on the other table, we can do that as well. We can also do filters within the table view, and we can also do summarizations within the filter view. So if I go back actually over the spacecraft journey catalog, so this specific table has 1,000 records in it. So if I want to do a summary and I want to do a count of rows, and so there's 1,000 records, and then I want to count per spacecraft name. So how many spacecrafts made a journey with their specific spacecraft name. So we see that a bunch of them have one, but there's a bunch of DataStax ones that had 10 journeys. Yeah, and so you can do this directly within your table view, but then you can also do this within your dashboards. And then also, if you go into this ask a question, is essentially you can essentially write SQL and make simple statements. So if you're not technically savvy and you want to say, show me how many XX, and you can use these kinds of methods Metabase provides, and Metabase will internally go and make those charts or grab that data for you, which is really cool. So again, they have their notebook editor here, and then you can also write your own SQL queries. But you can also go into the write SQL method. So a little nuance here is when you're doing your SQL, just doing normal, autocomplete, very nice. When running just normal SQL, it's not going to work because you will need, also, you don't need semicolons. This is not going to work because you'll need to attach your schema name. So our schema name is demo, and you'll need that so that way the data gets returned back. Otherwise, just using a normal, just spacecraft journey over time, it won't work. You will need to preface your tables with the schema name. Also, if you want to create dashboards or create visualizations, you can go to the plus sign, and then you can create dashboards from there, and then you can create queries on top and then add them to the dashboards. But you can play with that on your own. But again, like we mentioned earlier in the workflow, they have these pulses that you can set and send updates or data to yourself, so or to others or to Slack or email. So yeah, it's really cool. That way you can keep reporting up to date, and you can continually make data-driven decisions based off if there's an increase on something and you want to further improve it, or if there's a decrease on something and you need to change something. But we'll go into the auto-generated dashboards that Metabase does for us. So right on the main homepage, if we click on our schema demo, so we have two dashboards that are already created, one per table. So if we click on the one with 1,000 records, it shows us a couple metrics. So it shows us total events in the last 30 days, event growth, and then events over time. It automatically did that for us. And then a couple other different visualizations that you can do. You can further filter this. So if you want to change time periods, you can also do zoom ins. You can do drag and drop, click and drag slices and get.
Did it just
slice
figure that
data.
out? Arpin, did that just figure that out, that it would be a time series data and it just showed it to you? Or did you add those yourself?
No, that was auto generated.
No way.
So there is time associated
Okay.
in the table, and I guess it automatically did that for us.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at the data, you can drill down on the specific data itself. So if I click on this and then view that specific data, so there's a start and an end time. So it took those and then played with them. All right. So I'm gonna go back. So yeah, you can drill down like that, and then let's see. Another thing that I thought was really cool is if we go over the 1,000, like I mentioned, we could do. I want to edit this. All right, I'll do it this way. All right, so we have this count by start. So instead of doing a summary by start date, we want to see how many trips. So there's a summary associated with these spacecraft journeys. So there could be something that was for ISS rotations or delivering food or something like that, right? But we want to see how many there have been per item. So we could say how many per spacecraft name, like we showed you earlier, but then we can do summary. So if we want to see this, it'll give us it back in the tabular format. We can change it to a visualization with just a few clicks. So we'll put it in a bar chart and that's it. And then we can just visualize this. So we can see that there were 65 trips in the catalog that were for finding new forms of life. And then we could say there's 71 for landing on Mars. Say if we want to drill down on 71 on landing on Mars, and then we want to further visualize this. Nope. I don't have the data, like I don't have the data for it, but if there was a column or if we had something in another table in Cassandra that had duration time, so this is only start and end time, it didn't actually calculate duration time for us. But if we had a column for duration time, we could see differences between those 71 items, and then we can put that on a graph. So we could see if there's an outlier per duration times and see what went wrong. Maybe there was a fuel issue. Maybe someone got lost in space. But we can see and make analysis and data-driven decisions to see, okay, over time the duration is decreasing. Maybe that's because technology is getting better. Or say if it's taking longer, maybe technology is the same reason. It's just more technology requires more power or more fuel, more duration time. So that's what you can use big data for. Obviously, this data sample is very small, but it's just an insight into what you could potentially do with something like Metabase, something like Redash, something like Superset. Yeah, that's about it. I definitely recommend you try this out on your own because it's a really cool tool. Definitely recommend trying out the other tools if you're able to. Yeah, that'll wrap up the demo.
Have you used Metabase with Presto?
It's using Presto.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were just doing queries on Cassandra, and I was like wondering how you were doing all of these different filters. Okay, sorry, I missed.
Oh no, yeah, no. Because Metabase does not natively connect with Cassandra, we have to use Presto or Spark.
Okay, but what if you used because there's a JDBC connector for Metabase, and if you had the JDBC driver, I think you can connect to Cassandra if you just natively connect it to using like the JDBC driver, but it may not be preloaded, right? I think that's what the issue is. Yeah, got it. And what about? Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to ask was so have you also tried a Metabase with like Spark SQL or like always on SQL with DataStax?
No, I did have some issues trying to connect it. I think it may have either been some the host URL issue. I didn't have the chance to debug it at the time. That's something I could definitely look into next. But since I got Presto working, I just ran with it.
Okay, cool. Very cool.
Does Metabase work with REST APIs?
I There,
You're talking like if it connects to,
they have their own API that you could use, but
Right, but I mean, like, does it for data sources, like, you know, if your data source has a REST API?
probably not. I think there are other, I think Metabase and Redash both, they focus primarily on actual databases. Can you go to the Redash connectors? Redash has a lot of connectors that make support REST. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, so Redash connects to pretty much anything here. Yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, most of these BI tools, I think they focus on, oh, there you go. Redash has JSON. I guess, but does it just use JSON data or can you talk to a REST API? That's the question.
you could potentially use something like Stitch,
Yeah.
TL.
Oh, well, then you can connect it to DataStax's Spark natively through the Spark job server. It's going to return JSON.
Yeah. Well, at that point, I mean, I think if you're using DataStax Spark, then you could technically just talk directly to the always on SQL server via JDBC. But I think what you bring up, Jay, is a good point. Like in a lot of cases, the only way to get the data is JSON. And the services like Stitch and there's another one, not Stitch. There's a bunch of these like integration companies, low code, no code integration companies, where they allow you to connect arbitrary REST APIs and then bring them into a database of your choice. Could be Cassandra, could be SQL Server, could be. Does Stitch give you like a quote hosted massive database that doesn't have any like specific technology? No, right?
Stitch was like it's just plug and chug, like
Yeah.
ingress, egress.
Yeah. Actually, I think Stitch is the one that came up with the Singer ETL framework. If you Google Singer ETL, it's an open Python-based framework for, that logo seems familiar. So yeah, that's basically allows you to, they have a bunch of connectors if you go check it out. Yeah, taps and targets. And so they've open sourced their framework. What Stitch Data has, they've open sourced their framework to get data. And these are all REST APIs. A lot of these are just REST APIs. And it gets the data and it brings it together in a standard format, I think either CSV or JSON. And then you can do whatever you want with it. But not only does it have a way to get the data, it also has a way to send the data somewhere. So like a target, so tap and a target. So if it's JSON data and you were trying to do some BI on it, I would say like here we go. Here are the targets. So I think, so you could like literally take JSON, bring it into CSV and then, or Postgres and take a look at it. I wonder how much effort would be involved to like make a target for Cassandra, like a Singer target. Well, there's a lot of work involved apparently. Cool. That's a good question, Jay. Does that answer your question though?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there are some different options there through the Spark jobs for DataStax or open source. But yeah, Stitch is that part of the Metabase stack or what? I'm sorry, I missed the part how I got onto Stitch.
Stitch is like kind of like a
Wrong.
ETL, like it's a like kind of a low code, no code. You have an ingress source and then you have an egress source, and it just kind of transfers data for you in the pipeline. When I looked at it, maybe it's it's improved since the last time I did it. see.
Yeah, it's basically ETL as a service.
Yeah.
Basic ETL as a service. Does it do like any major transformation for you?
I don't remember it being able to, but again, it's maybe what I was doing at the time wasn't necessarily data driven. It may have been working with just transfer, so I didn't actually look at doing physical transformation on it. Looks like they have analysis tools, but so it structures your data for compatibility.
Mhm.
So maybe.
Yeah. More than likely, I think people use it to just move data. So they do an extraction and a load, and then they do a transformation once it's in the place where it needs to be with like a different tool, like Spark or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like, I mean, I just sent a link through chat, but with Stitch, you can actually analyze all your import data with Spark with Stitch.
Nice.
So if you can bring your own Spark, and that's DSE or what have you, you're running the Cassandra connector. There you go. That's how you can do it. That's another route. That's probably the preferred method, depending on like where Spark sits, what the overall architecture is for the use case.
Yep. And actually, I just noticed Stitch is now has been bought up by Talend. And so Talend has their own kind of old school legacy ETL framework based on, I think, Camel or yeah, I think it's based on Camel. But I know that Talend itself is a whole different ecosystem for running ETL. And recently, Talend has streaming into Cassandra. And it also has the ability to like make a workflow and have it run on Spark. But yeah, basically, I think eventually if you get the data into a database, Metabase can take a look at it pretty much. Can you show the Metabase connectors again? I think if you just go to, there we go. Oh, nice. It supports Snowflake and Spark SQL. Very cool. Yeah, I think I keep thinking that like Metabase has way more. Oh, here's a few.
These are community built.
Yeah. There we go, Spark Databricks. But I mean, it has Spark SQL, so technically like that gets you far enough to do anything. Cool. Yeah, I think Redash has a lot more connectors. They both started off in the same time frame, and Metabase really focused on ease of use, whereas Redash focused on more connectors. And I think Redash is a little bit more like kludgy and for like data admins and DBAs versus I think Metabase actually, once you get it up and running, normal business analysts, data analysts can actually use it without having too much of data analysts need to know SQL, but really like it's on, in terms of usability, I think it's probably one of the more friendlier tools to use. Like even compared to Tableau, I think it's just a much easier tool to play around with and explore the data. Because it has those linkages, like you don't have that stuff in Redash, where you say, here's a query, and then you click on it and it shows you the record, right? I think you can also edit data in Metabase. You're using Presto, but I think in a regular database,
perhaps.
Yeah, I think you can't do it in this one. Yeah, in a regular relational database or like a direct connection, if there's ever a connectivity to Cassandra, that's kind of par for the course for all of their connectors. Is that not only can you see the data, explore it, visualize it, you can also click on it and edit it like like SQL Server, Management Studio. You can just click on it and save it, and it saves it back. So it's actually pretty solid. Very cool. Awesome. Well, if there aren't any other questions, it looks like somebody else joined. Chuba, did you have any question, anything to add?
Real quick, is Metabase distributed system? Does it work generally with the Hadoop commons or ecosystems, distributed systems generally? Asking for node to node ETL.
I'm
With
not
respect
too
to what-
sure about that. Maybe Raul, if you know better.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you're talking about two different kind of functions. The BI tools, specifically like Metabase, Redash, Tableau, their core focus is to get the data and allow you to explore and visualize it. And so they generally depend on the data source system for the distribution of the work. So like, to answer your question, does Metabase support distributed processing? Not Metabase, but I think you came in a little bit later, and I actually forgot that he had done this as well. But Arpan is running Presto. And if you want to bring up the Presto ecosystem, Arpan, you can show that Presto actually works with a lot of different data sources, and Presto is distributed. So Presto can do queries on HDFS via Hive, and basically there we go. It works on Accumulo. It can work with, I think HBase is there somewhere. Hive, yeah, it works with Hive. Yeah, so from a distributed ecosystem, a lot of these are distributed. So for example, it can query data directly from Kinesis. It can query data directly from Accumulo, Elasticsearch, but the system itself has to be distributed in its own way. And then Presto does its own distributed queries.
Is there any overhead though with Presto layer versus direct to Spark, if that's the use case? I think that's what maybe you were getting at before with your question. I would have the same question for performance reasons.
Yeah, so Presto, from what I understand, is fairly stateless. It does have a cache internally, but it's more like a virtualization of the data. Whereas in Spark, so Spark has its own, Hive Metastore. Ultimately, they both have their pros and cons. If you have enough, everything has overhead. I mean, ultimately, everything has overhead. There's nothing without overhead. It's just a matter of like what your goal is. With Presto, because it's kind of like a virtualization layer, it has to bring everything in to Presto, and it does these operations using these workers. Presto also has a system that runs on top of Spark. So Presto on top of Spark. That's a different thing in itself. The other thing that Presto has is, I think, ease of connectivity. You're able to just connect all of these systems, and it makes a Hive metastore of all of these things. And it can persist that Hive metastore to HDFS or S3, and essentially gives you a data catalog that's universally available via SQL. Now, Spark, you can do the same thing, but you have to do a lot more work to make sure that you create these, the Spark SQL tables, and you connect them to the right source. And you tend to need to have a lot more memory around. But what you lose in computation ability in Presto, you gain in connectivity, and generally being able to get data from anywhere. You can even do joins between data sources in Presto. In Spark, you can do the same thing, but you need a massive amount of memory. It has to bring everything in. Presto is just engineered differently. It doesn't focus on bringing data in because it's not really thinking about data in the same way that Spark thinks about it. But both are very powerful tools, and you can actually use them in conjunction with a tremendous amount of kind of power. Cool.
I have one question. So it's not related to the tools that we discussed today. I just wanted to ask in general, what do people use when they're moving data to, say, in my organization, they generally move the data to Airflow, so or like in Snowflake. That is what the BI team uses. And for that, we use Spark jobs to load the whole table every time, because the data model does not, like, we don't have columns that can differentiate the latest updated by time as such, right? So it gets pretty costly soon. So what do people generally use when they want to move incremental data out of Cassandra into, say, Snowflake or some other tool?
Yeah, somebody else could go and I can kind of follow after that. So if there's no takers, yeah, it's a good question, Dipan. I think the your challenge of like incremental updates to a data warehouse, it's a common challenge, right? It's not just with Snowflake. It could be anything to anything. So a couple of ways. It depends on how the data is being generated and put into Cassandra in the first place, right? So one way to deal with that problem is if your architecture supports or already has a queue, then you can mirror that queue and have a processor that saves data directly into Snowflake. And then you have real-time synchronization between your Cassandra and your Snowflake. And Snowflake supports streams. It has its own streaming engine and it has its own Kafka kind of like connector. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it would be to use Cassandra triggers and use Cassandra's CDC, change data capture, to send data to Snowflake. So I haven't personally done it, but there is a change data capture connector from Cassandra to Kafka Connect. And then Kafka Connect has a bunch of connectors going into it and going out of it. So there's like a Snowflake connector. It's for the destination from Kafka Connect. But that's kind of your ideal state, meaning stream everything, right? So even if data comes into Cassandra and then you want to then stream those changes into Snowflake, it takes effort, it takes an additional component, but otherwise, basically Spark is your best bet if you don't have any other way to get incremental updates, right? One thing you could potentially consider is, everything is stored in terms of timestamp in Cassandra. So there's ability for you to potentially query data based on the timestamp of the actual data update, but then you may be getting data that you don't want. So.
Okay, yeah. So so Kafka is a good suggestion, right? We use Kafka, our data, like we get our data from Kafka itself, right? We have microservices in between. So the problem is that sometimes the data is processed outside of what we receive from Kafka. So that would be a blind spot for us. So we're not, that was the first suggestion that came to our mind too, but then it did not work out. So I think we still have to explore CDC with Kafka connector, and maybe that can help us.
Yeah.
The larger tables, yeah.
Yeah, and this is recent, but there's kind of two places, or three actually. So there's lenses, there's Debezium and DataStax. They all have kind of their own implementations of the CDC. And I'll just share these in here. So this is the lenses one. Then this is the Debezium one. Let's see, the Debezium one is kind of a little bit newer, but the lenses and the DataStax ones are supposedly production grade. But yeah, this should be able to get anything that happens in Cassandra that CDC will have and be able to bring into Kafka Connect. And then once it's in Kafka Connect, you can just use a Kafka Connect to Snowflake sync. Cool.
Okay. So Debezium had one. So Like I've not looked at the other two. We were able to look at the Debezium, and they had some limitations that they had noted. Yeah, there is a warning up on the Debezium page. Right, there are some of the things that we do depend on. So I'll still look at the other two. I think that might.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be great if you get it to work. It'd be cool to get your perspective on, how to do Cassandra to Snowflake. Incremental updates. But that's a really good challenge to look into. Awesome. Anything else, folks? We're at the top of the hour. I will take back the screen. If you can let go of it, Arpin, thank you. Just as another reminder, we have all of these videos on YouTube, and we also have a few other events coming up. So next week, we have things related to Spark and data lakes and distributed ML frameworks, but it's not necessarily related to Cassandra. You can definitely use the same knowledge there. And then in the weeks following after that, it's Databricks and DataStax Astra, which are both managed Spark and managed Cassandra as a service and a Spark as a service. So please check that out. Also, yesterday we did a workshop with Astra and Spark and Kafka. If you're curious, it should be on the DataStax Devs YouTube because it was broadcast to YouTube Live. We had a really great turnout. We had about 2,000 registrants, 300, 400 live viewers, and we got a lot of good feedback. So I think it was a good session. And with that, I will let you guys go with the rest of your day. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Same place, same time, 11 Central, 12 p.m. Eastern. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, good job, Arpin.
Thank you.